We've been going through Proverbs, and I've encouraged you to pick up, or not to pick a proverb, but on the day, like the first, we start with the first proverb, second, so on down the road. Man, oh man, that's what I did this week, and I am glad I am not a woman this week. Holy cow! Solomon was after women. I mean, not in a good way either. I don't know if you've been reading it, you'll know exactly what I mean. Now, that's going to get everybody interested to go back and read it and find out what it said. It did not always say good things, okay? He was not part of the Me Too movement at all that I know of, but it was good, and I enjoyed it so much, and I really, really liked it, and especially because there are times where I read the Bible and I say, man, that is hitting me right where it shouldn't. And this week, not the case, which was really good. So, as you know, we've been plowing through Proverbs. Somebody asked me, since everybody's back to school, are we going to start a new one? No, summer doesn't stop until September 23rd. So, we've got at least a couple weeks there. And where it takes the pressure off me a little bit. Sometime back ago, though, I've got a story to start out with. Sometime back a while ago, there were two women that were driving on the Autobahn. Now, if you don't know, the Autobahn in Germany was created for cars to go as fast as they wanted. And some of them, it was created for some of them to go anywhere up to 140 to 160 miles an hour. That's how fast Larry Dillon drives a bus. So anyway, they were on the Autobahn, and two women ran out of gas. And as they ran out of gas, they finally found a gas station. They hoofed it. They found a gas station. They secured the gas station. They went to the gas station. They filled up their tanks with gas, and then they drove the two back. But the one that was driving found out that she didn't have any money, and so it's a lot like I've been out with individuals before, and they go out with you to have lunch, and when they have lunch, then they reach for their wallet and they say, I must have left my money and my ATM card at home. And but this is what this gal did. And they made a deal with them that the one gal would stand in, and she would kind of be the deposit that she would leave, and then the other gal would come back after she got the money. And so a couple hours passed by, and there was no woman to come back and get the gal. And she stood there and felt betrayed, which she was, of her friend. And so finally they made her, the woman that was there, answer a bunch of questions as to why and who the person was, and she gladly did that because she no longer considered this gal a friend because she had betrayed her like that. She was a fraud. And so Proverbs, in the book of Proverbs, it tells us that there are going to be friends exactly like that. As a matter of fact, it says in Proverbs chapter 13, it says, a companion of fools suffers harm. A companion of fools suffers harm. Now, why did that girl stay behind as a human deposit at the gas station? To allow herself to be stranded like that? No. Well, she trusted her friend. And I am here to tell you that when trust is gone in a friendship, that it's all over. Now, trust is earned. Trust is given at the very start of the relationship, but you break that trust, and that's going to have to be earned. And so the gal, felt like her trust had been broken and that she could not give it back. And the point of it is what friends we choose, because some friends won't take us where we want to go, but it is necessary to choose good friends. It is necessary to choose good friends. Listen to what Numbers says. God tells Israel, if you do not drive out the inhabitants of the land, if the Israelites allowed them to stick around and become their friends, those you allow to remain will become barbs in your eyes and thorns in your side. They will give you trouble in the land where you will live. In other words, Israel needed to avoid hanging around certain people that were going to hurt them. In the very presence of these former inhabitants that he's talking about of the land could hurt Israel. And the Bible tells us the same thing. Who we hang out with can cause us great pain. Proverbs chapter 13 says, a companion of fools suffers harm. A biblical case in point tells a story of a man named Lot, the nephew of Abraham. You remember the story. At one point in his life, the Bible tells us that Lot saw the whole plain of Jordan as well watered, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt towards Zoar. And Lot lived among the cities of the plain and pitched his tents near Sodom. Now the men of Sodom were wicked and were sinning greatly against the Lord. Was Sodom a good place? No. But it certainly looked like a good place. It certainly, all of the trees were trimmed and all of the hedges looked nice, and there was no erosion, Kathy, with the land at all. There was none of that. It was a beautiful neighborhood, so to speak, if we put it into our language of today. Everything was as it should be. It seemed like a nice place to raise a family. They had the best school districts. Everything was good. They looked good. It was a lot like the fig tree. You remember when Jesus came by, the fig tree, and as he was going into Israel, you remember what happened. Jesus looked at the fig tree, and it had all of the leaves. It looked really good. It looked super good. It had all of the leaves that it needed to have. But it didn't bear figs at all. It didn't do exactly what it was intended to do. And so Jesus, what did Jesus do? Though it looked good, he cursed that fig tree. Which is an odd thing, because it looked good. It had all the leaves. It had all of the trappings. It had good looks. But it didn't do exactly what it was supposed to do. Yesterday I was into, my wife had left for something, so I figured that would be a good time to go and get some of those gigantic peaches, white peaches that they have over at Costco. And so I went over, they're wonderful. And man, they're good. Oh, they're delicious. So I went in there and I got these white peaches, and I wheeled them up to the front along with a few other things, and it didn't take me long. And in fact, I even took Luke with me, and I said, Luke, do you want to go get some peaches? And do you want to go in the car? And you just say you want to go, and he's in the car. And so he wanted to go in the car, and so I went. I got some of these peaches. They were gigantic. I mean, they're big. They were about like that. As I was leaving, the gal that was ringing me up said, boy, those are some big peaches. I said, you're doggone right. I pick out the best. And so she looked at those and she said to me, you know what? All of a sudden I'm hungry for peaches. So our eyes sometimes can deceive us as to what is good. Now, they were good. In fact, this morning, my wife and I stopped at McDonald's, as we do every Sunday morning, because it's the best restaurant in America, and we got there, and we took inside of there. They don't sell peaches. I didn't know that, but they don't sell peaches, and so we took in 2 peaches, and man, they were extremely good. And my wife told me how I should cut them, and they're better, but I just dig right into mine. And so a lot of times our eyes can deceive us, our ears can deceive us about other individuals and the influence they'll have on us. Lot was sitting in the gateway of the city. Now, the importance of that is simply this. Ordinarily, those who sit at the gateway of the city are the elders of that city. In other words, the leaders of that city. Men of prominence in the community. These were men who were called on upon by others in the city to settle disputes. And so Lot was the man. It was kind of the courthouse area of where he should live. So first Lot pitches his tents near Sodom. Then he moves into the city. Now he's a prominent leader in Sodom. All of a sudden he moves from just sitting at the gateway of the city, and he was and 2 Peter tells us that he was a righteous man. He had been drawn into a wicked city. But after a while, the immorality and the unrighteousness of his companions began to wrap his righteousness and the damage to his family. Genesis 19, tremendous story about, well, not tremendous in the sense of morality, but it's a story that tells us how far and the degradation of sin will take us. Tells us that when the men of the town realized Lot had male guests in his home, which were the angels that stayed with Lot, they surrounded his house and demanded that Lot allow them to have homosexual relations with the angels. Well, Lot wasn't going to have that. And so he thought up the brilliant plan how to protect his guest. He decided that he would protect his guest. And so what does he do? He offers, now get this, he offers the crowd his daughters instead of the angels, the men. Seriously? That's a good plan? And this is the act of a righteous man. I don't think so. And then the angels convinced Lot and his family to flee the city and warned them not to turn around when they flee the city. So what does Lot's wife do? Just like any good wife would do, she turns around and she looks back. And what happens is she gets turned into a pillar of salt. And she had grown so attached to her home with all of the trappings and all of the things that she had wanted and all of the things that she had gotten down through the years, that she had to take one more look and see just what it was that she longed for all of her life. Now, and then Lot and his daughters, we're not going to leave them out of the story, flee to the hills around the city. And when Lot and his daughters realized their prospects for finding a husband, all of a sudden it went from a lot of prospects to no prospects. Then they make up the grand idea. Now, again, Lot was a supposed righteous man, and they decided that it would be a good idea to sleep with their father. Well, of course, what happened was they became pregnant, and they ultimately bear children by him, and this one is one big tangled mess. I want to tell you again, I've said this before time and time again, but I want to tell you again that sin will take you further than you ever thought you would go. I'm certain that Lot never thought that he would be warding off people to have sex with angels at his own yard. I'm sure that Lot never thought that he would end up taking his daughters and and giving them up instead. I'm sure that Lot never thought that his wife would turn into a pillar of salt because of what she wanted and what she longed for in her heart. I'm sure that Lot would have never thought that all of these things would have happened to him, but it did. And so I want to tell you that sin will take you further than you ever dreamed that you could go. That's a scary thought, isn't it? And then Lot and his daughters flee to the hills around the city. But it happened because of even a righteous man can be led astray. Did you hear me? Even a righteous man can be led astray. Lot did not choose his companions wisely, and it hurt his entire family. Look at what it says. 2 Corinthians warns us, do not be yoked together with unbelievers. Do not be yoked together with unbelievers. For what does righteousness and wickedness have in common? Or what fellowship can light have with darkness? It is a question he is asking. What is it that light has with darkness? Because when the light comes in, I want to tell you, there is no darkness. There is no darkness. Or if you are just one little flicker, one little candle, I want to tell you that darkness can overpower sometimes if there is enough of it. And so, did you notice, though, in that verse, what did it say? It said, did you notice the word fellowship in 2 Corinthians 6? What fellowship can light have with darkness? That word fellowship is a fairly interesting. It's actually made up of two words, fellow and ship. Fellowship. That's why I'm the senior pastor. It brings an image to my mind of two fellows in one ship. Now, if you have two fellows in one ship, can they go in different destinations? No, of course they can't. If you have two fellows in one ship, they've got to go in one direction. You're going to have fellowship with someone, you better be sure you want to go where you are going, because more than likely, if you're not careful, that's where you're going to end up going, where they want to go. Listen to what it says. The acts of the sinful nature are obvious. Sexual immorality, impurity, debauchery, idolatry, and witchcraft, hatred, discord, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambitions, dissensions, factions, and envy, drunkenness, orgies, and the like. I warn you, as I did before, that those who live like this, what does it say, will not inherit the kingdom of God. Why would Paul write about the works of the sinful nature to these Christians living in Galatia? That's how they live their lives. And Christians need to be careful to avoid getting into ships headed in that direction. Paul was warning the Christians in Galatia, first of all, because some of them have fallen back into those life choices that they didn't mean to fall into, but they did. The draw of the past and the old friends and the companions of the past are hurting them. In fact, they're killing them. In fact, they're dragging them down. And Paul was telling them their very salvation could be at stake if they didn't resist. I have individuals who come up to me and they say something like this, he's been my best friend for 20 years. And I ask sometimes, I say, is he a Christian? Oh, no. As a matter of fact, he is anti-Christian. He is totally against Christ. He doesn't want anything to do with Christ. I think to myself, and after 20 years, you're going to have a greater influence on him than he has on you. But you better be careful. Paul was warning the Christians in Galatia, because some of them have fallen back into those life choices that they had made earlier. Paul was telling them their very salvation could be at stake if they didn't resist. Proverbs 13:20 says, "He who walks with the wise grows wise." he who walks with the wise grows wise. If you're having fellowship with wise people, then you end up being like them. If you want to be wise, hang out with wise people. If you want to be wise, hang out with wise people. For example, the Proverbs says this: do not make friends with a hot-tempered man. Do not make friends with a hot-tempered man. Do not associate with one easily angered, or you may learn his ways and get yourself ensnared. If you hang around angry people, you risk learning and engrafting those ways, their anger, into your own life. It's not just the Bible that tells us that. Listen to this. There was a study done by Brown University, and the researchers said their research suggests that divorce is contagious. It's like the chicken pox or something. They found the divorce of a friend or loved one increases your chances of getting divorced. The study conducted in Framingham, Massachusetts, found that 75% of participants were more likely to get a divorce if a friend was divorced. That's amazing to me. And then 33% were more likely to end their marriage even if a friend of a friend got divorced. So you see the succession of the lineage just keeps going through. That it's not just the friends you pick, it's the friends that your friends pick as well. Repeatedly, the Bible warns us against spending time with the wrong kinds of people. 1 Corinthians says, do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. Bad company corrupts good character. Now, that doesn't mean you can't have non-Christian friends. It just means if they're going to be your friends, you've got to be careful that they don't steer the boat. That it's you that's leading, not them. Now, here's an illustration. Of somebody, I don't know who it was. I had a young girl tell me she had a friend who was a Christian that they were seeking advice from. The advice this friend gave them didn't sound quite right, so I asked, how do you know if they're a Christian? Do they go to church? What's the story with them? No, the girl said, but they read their Bible all the time. They just don't think they have to go to church to be a Christian. Essentially, this friend didn't go to church because they didn't think it was all that important. Now, what the friend said was partly true. You don't have to go to church to be a Christian, but you can't be as good a Christian if you don't go to church. So, it may be a good idea for you to look around and look at a few, and if somebody's missing, you can tell them just exactly what I said this morning. If somebody tells me they are a Christian and they love Jesus, but they don't want to go to church, automatically red flags go up. Ephesians 5 says, husbands, love your wife just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Did you catch that? Christ loved the church. He loved the church so much, he gave himself up for her. And this guy wants to tell me they love Jesus, but he doesn't love his church. That would be like somebody telling me, you know, we really love you, Pastor, but your wife I can't stand. It's not going to happen. I don't know who I'm getting as the peanut gallery over here, but either way, I don't want this man trying to steer my boat. I'm going to have close friends. I'm going to have friends I spend most of the time with. If I'm going to have friends, who am I going to allow to shape and mold who I am? Then I want friends who will steer my boat towards Jesus and the things that he loves. Things like the church. Things like purity in my life. Things like dedication to God in my family. Things like living as a man or a woman of God. Things like standing up for biblical righteousness. Those kinds of things. That's the kind of person that I want to be around, and that's the kind of person that I want to influence my life. Because if I associate too closely with the people who don't share those values, then I'll end up going places I don't really want to go. And being left in places I don't really want to stay. Proverbs 12:26 tells us we have to be careful about who we choose for friends. It says this, a righteous man is cautious in friendships. In other words, if you live your life right and you want to please God, you have to be careful about who you choose as a friend. As I was thinking, though, I realized that a lot of times we don't choose our friends. Friends are often people that we kind of fall in with, aren't they? And we don't so much as choose them as we end up spending time with them at common activities. We might bowl with them. We might go to our kids' games with them. We might go to certain activities because they are a part of them. We might take our grandkids to the same activities their kids go to. We just kind of bump into them in life, and we find we like them and want to spend time with them, and there's nothing technically wrong with that, and that's how you increase your sphere of influence in your life. That's how you meet people, and you begin to find folks you can introduce the really big friend to, Jesus Christ. Then I got to thinking about the kind of people Jesus spent time with. What kind of people did Jesus spend time with? He caught a lot of flack for this. Jesus spent a lot of time with his 12 closest friends, first of all, his disciples. Can you imagine what it must have been like for 3 years? Spending time with Jesus Christ, listening, hanging on to every word that he had to say, listening to everything that he had to teach, understanding and knowing what he had to say. And here were 12 guys, and they weren't the most reputable guys when they started. First of all, every child in the Jewish tradition was born as a rabbinical student. They were a rabbi when they started out. If they had not memorized Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, by the age of 5, they were kicked out of rabbinical school. Then all of the Old Testament had to be memorized by the age of 12. So they had to have all of that memorized. That counts me out, man. I am not a rabbi. But Jesus spent a lot of times with his close friends who were not the stellar society friends. They were not stellar in the fact that they were the best within the church. They were not the greatest. They were not the best. They didn't win at Bible quizzing. They did none of that. In fact, they got kicked out of Christian schools. There was bad things that they did. But Jesus saw the potential within them. Every one of them. What kind of people did Jesus spend his time with? He spent his time with sinners. Oh, that's terrible. Tax collectors, prostitutes, and general losers in life. But Jesus never just happened to fall into those relationships. I want to tell you that he went out after those relationships. And he made an effort to get to know people. He didn't just kind of fall into it. Like, for example, the woman at the well, he didn't just say, hey, I think your daughter plays on my daughter's basketball team. He didn't say that. He just intentionally went out because he knew what her lifestyle was, and he went out to love her like nobody else could love her. Those people became Jesus' acquaintances and ultimately became his friends. But they never, ever, ever steered the boat. Never. In fact, there were plenty of times Jesus told these new acquaintances things they didn't want to hear. For example, there was a crippled man Jesus healed in John chapter 5. Some folks weren't happy that Jesus had healed this man on the Sabbath. That was a no-no. You shouldn't have done that, Jesus. It's the Sabbath day, and you should not go around doing good things on the Sabbath. And so he was criticized, and they criticized what Jesus had done. But when Jesus met him later in the day, these were Jesus' words to him. See, you have been made well, sin no more, lest a worse thing come upon you. This man had stood up for Jesus. He literally had become Jesus' friend. But Jesus says to him, quit doing what you were doing. Stop sinning. Because if you don't, things could get worse. Let me ask you a question. Let's bring that up to the 21st century. If you have a friend that is destroying themselves with drug abuse, do you do anything about it? Do you say anything to them? If you have a friend that is destroying their lives with something that's going to kill them, whatever it is, do you do a thing about it? Or you just say, you know what? We need to ease into this thing. I'll tell you something that I tell the staff once in a while, not too often, well, pretty often, but not that often. I tell them sometimes people just need to be smacked in the mouth. Chuck always says, I'll do it. No, he doesn't. Sometimes people just need to be confronted. And I'm here to tell you today that if you care enough with individuals, you'll confront them. Or you realize that eventually, that destructive behavior will eventually kill them, especially in their spiritual life. If you have a friend who's abusing alcohol, for example, would you tell them? He was my hero. If you were here a few years ago and I preached on heroes on Easter Sunday morning, he was kind of my hero because he knew the Bible inside out. He was an atheist, but yet he was a seeker and he was a hero of mine, kind of. He knew the Bible inside out. In fact, I was going into Bible college. He knew it better than I ever did. And so he would talk to me a lot about it. And one time, a couple times, we went to a University of Michigan, which they barely squeaked it out yesterday, which is not a thing, not something that's going to happen all the time. But we went to the game, and I said to him, in my own way, I said, Jeff, I think you're an alcoholic. He said, I'm not an alcoholic. You're kidding me. I said, no, I'm not kidding you. So from that time forward, for about the next 2 years, wasn't the most popular thing. I would ask him, did you have an alcoholic beverage last night? And he would say, yes, I cracked open 3 beers last night. I had an alcoholic beverage. And so the next day he would come in and I would say, Jeff, did you have an alcoholic beverage last night? And so over and over that scenario played out. Over and over it went over. And I finally said to him, Jeff, what is an alcoholic? And he said, someone who needs alcohol every day of his life. And I said to him, Jeff, for the past few months, I've asked you every single day if you had something with alcohol in it last night. And every single day you have answered in the affirmative, yes, I have. So what does that make you, Jeff? And he gave me some flim-flam answer. He was smart as a whip. He gave me some flim-flam answer, but I will tell you what I told you a few weeks ago. We are determined what we are by the actions that we participate in. For example, I'll give this again. If we lie every single day, we lie again, we lie again, we lie again, and every single day, at every single chance, we lie, a lot of times, then what does that make us? A liar. If we cheat on our wife every single day, or our husband every single day, and we do it over and over and over and over again, that makes us a cheater. Right? It might get you on television, by the way. If we are determined by the actions that we participate in, you guys, then my reasoning with Jeff is, okay, Jeff, you had alcohol this day, 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 for 2 straight months. What's that make you? He didn't know what to say. Hello? Everybody okay? Everybody's still here. But now, here's where it can get ticklish. There are a lot of Christians who have no trouble telling people to live righteous lives. I can look at Jimmy and I can say, Jimmy, you need to live a righteous life. I can look at my wife and say, honey, you need to live a righteous life. I can look at Mark Stevie and say, Mark Stevie, you need to live a righteous life. And it can get a little ticklish for many Christians because the royal law of the kingdom is that people should live righteous lives. That's what we think. But it's not. Don't get me wrong. We serve a righteous God who calls us to live righteous lives. But that is not the royal law of the kingdom. Do you know what the royal law of the kingdom is? The royal law is found in Scripture. Love your neighbor as yourself. My point is, if you believe your main job is to call people to righteousness, you can risk becoming like the Pharisees of Jesus' day. Those guys who called people to righteousness too, but they didn't love the people they confronted. You don't love people, your call to righteousness will sound hollow. You don't love people, your call to righteousness is going to sound hollow. I'm telling you, if you love individuals and they know you love them, you can get away with a whole lot more. A whole lot more. But if you don't love them, all that righteousness that you're screaming at them, or you're hollering at them in some kind of way, or you're insisting that they become righteous according to your standards and according to your lifestyle, if you're constantly barbing them to righteous living and not loving them, the key for Jesus was that he loved the people that he called to righteousness. Right? My command is this. Love each other as I have loved you. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you servants because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends. For everything that I learned from my Father I have made known to you. This is my command. Love each other. Love is the key thing that should drive us. If we tell people what they need to hear and we tell them in love, then we have followed Jesus' example. We don't just blow them away with some kind of truth. and say, well, you know, the truth hurts sometimes, doesn't it? Yes, it does. It does hurt sometimes. But you have to do that in a spirit of love. We've shown him that we understand his message. We've shown him we know how to steer the boat his way.